Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time talking episodes 21 and 22 of Season 2 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. called S.O.S. Part 1 and 2. So here is our big Season 2 finale, and it definitely does deliver. I remember when I was watching this show on Tuesday night, and it was just about, the first hour was over, and I looked at the clock and I'm like, oh my god, there's still an hour of this left? So much has happened already. Excuse me. And yeah, there's quite a lot going on, and this makes for a pretty darn satisfying conclusion to Season 2, which I have to say really did overall improve quite a bit as the show went on. We were introduced to some new characters like Mockingbird and Lance, and they added quite a lot to the show. And of course, there was the whole thing with Skye getting her powers, and us finding out that she's indeed the cinematic universe's equivalent of Daisy Johnson. Now, there was actually speculation for a while that they might do a spin-off show of S.H.I.E.L.D. with Ardrini Padalecki and Nick Blood as the leads, kind of like, I think it was even described as Mr. and Mrs. Smith in the Marvel Universe, which was actually a tagline that they used for describing Hawkeye and Mockingbird in the comics at one point. However, ultimately the folks behind the scenes decided to pass on that, and they pointed out quite correctly that one of the reasons this show did improve so much this season was that Ardrini Padalecki and Nick Blood are really good actors, and that their characters brought a lot to the table. So, as cool as a spin-off, more Marvel Cinematic Universe's live-action TV would be, you don't want to take two of these characters who've really done so much to boost this show up and take them away from that. So anyway, let's just kind of get into what's going on with the characters, and we'll talk a little bit about the overall plot and whatnot. So let's see. Let's start small, and let's talk briefly about Fitz this episode. He's a good place to start. Fitz going out there and once again showing he's willing to mix it up in the action if he has to. He helps Coulson and Mac out in the fight with Gordon, and I love how he just mocks Gordon once he is able to seriously negate Gordon's powers, and he just yells. Gordon's like, "Wait, what the hell?" And Fitz is all, "Science, biatch," and he actually says that, "Science, biatch." Which was absolutely hilarious. And then it's actually Fitz, by accident, who's the one who ultimately kills Gordon. I was a little disappointed that we didn't really get to see any sort of emotional fallout from that. I mean, he did just kill a guy. So you'd think that Fitz would at least have some emotional reaction to that. But, again, there's only so much time, and that would actually be kind of something that would be nice for them to deal with in Season 3. Let's see. Oh yes, of course we can't forget that this episode we finally see Simmons kind of say like, well, maybe there isn't the possibility for the two of us to be more than friends. And this so completely throws Fitz off his game that he accidentally unlocks the latch that has the big goopy black rock in it, and while he goes, he kind of wanders off, all happy that, oh yeah, I might really have a shot. Then the rock eats Simmons. And one of my friends was posting like on his Facebook after that. It's like, no, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D, not cool, not cool. And I went on there and I said like, dude, did you forget that this is a Joss Whedon show? And man, that moment there, that screamed Joss Whedon to me like nothing else this episode. Now, yeah, Whedon's had lots of stuff going on with the movies and the promotion and quitting Twitter for a multitude of reasons. But you have to imagine, remember, he's still kind of one of the guys in the background. And even like on other shows that he's worked on, like Buffy and such, where he didn't write episodes, he would usually at least have a look at the script and toss some notes back to the writers. And that's what I'm thinking was there at the end. That screams Joss Whedon idea. Even as busy as he was with Age of Ultron, he probably would have at least consulted with the writers and the other behind the scenes people on S.H.I.E.L.D. this season, And this feels so much like a Joss Whedon note that I can't imagine that it was anything but that. And one of the core rules that Whedon had for Buffy was Buffy should be unhappy. Remember, folks, and this is one of the things that it drives me nuts that people don't seem to understand about TV, especially drama, shows with drama as part of their selling point, is, and repeat after me, happiness is boring. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't have characters get together. It doesn't mean that good things can't happen to them. It just means that you always have to balance that out with some sort of conflict. And another thing that is trademark Joss Whedon, and he's even said this in his interviews, this is kind of one of the rules that he lives by, is give characters what they want, but give it to them in the worst way possible. Well, here it is, okay? Fitz has Simmons sort of hinting like, okay, maybe I do have some more than friendly feelings for you. And then just as it seems Fitz is, taking a step in a direction he's been wanting to go for a long time, fate comes around and bites him in the ass. I mean, again, it's him goofing, accidentally leaning on that lock that let that thing get opened and had the rock eat Simmons. So technically, this is Fitz's fault. And he's probably going to figure that out at some point, which is just going to be, another knife in the gut for the poor guy. I mean, look at Arrow as another example. It took 3 freaking seasons for Oliver and Felicity to get together. Now, granted, she wasn't intended to be a long-term character in season 1, so little leeway there. But, yeah. Apart from that, though, nothing particular to say about Simmons as a character. Now, let's talk about Mac briefly, and him and the whole space rock, or whatever the hell that thing is. At the end of it, Coulson decides that because Mac is just so staunchly against anything alien, he's the perfect guy to put in charge of keeping these things secure, because he won't be tempted to dick around with them. And there is a certain logic to that. However, Mac is an engineer. He is not a security specialist. So he's really probably not the most qualified guy to do this. Mac would be a great guy to maintain a security system. I mean, he was the ship's engineer, but he's shown that he's very gifted technologically in general. And then there's the fact that within hours of this appointment happening, the big black rock eats Simmons, thus showing that Mac is horribly, horribly unqualified for this job. I mean, seriously, when you're put in charge of security, and a couple of hours later, somebody is dead. Yeah. And here, the thing is, though, that this rock is kept in basically a big glass case that Fitz accidentally unlocks by leaning on it while he's distracted. I want you to stop and think about this for a moment. This means that this incredibly dangerous alien artifact of which Mac is in charge is less securely protected than the crap in my grandpa's tool shed. And all that thing has is a padlock. Stop and think about that. A padlock that you could buy for like not even $5 at Ace Hardware would have kept that stupid rock from eating Simmons. Mac is terribly unqualified for this job. Okay? There is a reason why Worf was in charge of security on the Enterprise D, not Geordi. Yeah, that's Coke, but unfortunately there's no rum or Jack in it. Of course, it's also not even noon, so probably for the best. Anyway, Mac did get a nice moment, of course, when he first encountered Gordon. Gordon goes like, "Who are you?" "Well, you're Gordon, right?" "I'm the guy who's gonna kill Gordon." I'm like, okay, I don't really have a terribly high opinion of Mac in general, but I'll give him points. That's a good line. And then Mac does cut Coulson's hand off with an axe. Again, this is another one of those things that really feels like kind of like an idea that probably came from the head of Joss Whedon. And if you're familiar with Buffy the Vampire Slayer, you probably understand what I'm talking about there. Yeah. As I said, nothing particular beside. Oh yes, Simmons. We do have to mention that the actress has said no. Simmons isn't dead. I can't really talk about what's going on with her, but she's not dead. Cool. So let's see. Well, let's just keep running through our Shield agents. I've already talked. Well, I've talked a little bit about. I haven't really talked about Mockingbird and Lance. I've talked more about their actors. Nothing really huge to say about Hunter this episode. This continues to show that despite their issues, he still deeply cares about Bobby. Now, the thing about Bobby, though, is that, of course, this episode she's held prisoners being tortured by Kara and Ward. And it clarifies exactly what Bobby did. She tipped Hydra off to a safe house in order to give a bunch of other agents a chance to get away. And unfortunately, against the odds, and Bobby was taking a gamble on doing that, Kara happened to be in the safe house at the time, and that's what got her captured, tortured, and brainwashed by Hydra. So it was really just sort of, Bobby took a calculated risk, it didn't pay off, and Kara was the one who paid the price. And of course, the problem here is that Bobby is completely unrepentant about all of this. And she actually seems to be even taking pleasure in just how not sorry she is. Now, granted, she doesn't want to give Ward and Kara satisfaction, because, what with the kidnapping and the, hey, we're going to torture you thing. But she does it in the stupidest way possible. I mean, if she, granted, it probably wouldn't have, we don't know whether or not it would have helped her situation. But the whole thing, I mean, really, if she just said to 33, like, look, I took a calculated risk and it didn't pay off, at least in your case. Odds were, I had every reason to believe that there were good odds that there was nobody in that safe house that I sent Hydra to. Unfortunately, you were there. But if you'd been in my position, can you honestly say you wouldn't have done the same thing if it meant saving the lives of 24 other agents? And that's what she did. She tipped them off to what she thought was probably an empty safe house, and that gave a bunch of other S.H.I.E.L.D. agents the opportunity to head for the hills and save their own lives. So I think if Bobby had kind of framed it like that, it's like, look, again, this was just really just a matter of bad luck rather than me trying to do anything malicious to you. It's like, look, I'm sorry for what happened, but can you honestly say that if you were in my position, you wouldn't have done the same? And maybe that would have made a difference, and maybe it wouldn't have. But I think it's a point that, under the circumstances, Ward and Kara probably would have had a hard time, at least completely and utterly dismissing. Now, granted, neither one of them is a terribly emotionally well-adjusted person. Ward, in particular, seems to take it sort of the idea that nothing is my fault. Kara, well, maybe. But in any case, a refusal to show even the tiniest drop of empathy is really what really bothers me about that whole scene with Bobby. I mean, yes, she did what was probably, she made basically a hard call under tough circumstances. But she refuses to show Kara even the tiniest bit of empathy. And this is somebody who was tortured and brainwashed. I mean, seriously. Tortured, brainwashed, and now she's been manipulated by Ward? I mean, come on, Bobby. A little empathy would go a long way. And the really interesting thing about it all is that despite everything that's going on here, 33 even does seem to understand, yeah, Ward's been using her a little bit, but she's cool with that because, as we see this episode, his feelings for her were genuine. And I love that thing where she even said, I stand with Ward. I about fell off the couch when I saw that. It's like, oh man, what a shout out to the fans who basically are totally on Ward's side no matter what. Yeah, I don't know about that, but cool little nod to the fandom there. And then, of course, Kara makes some dumb choices and is able to be manipulated by May into getting herself killed by Ward. And again, we see that Ward really does not take that well. He's genuinely just ripped up emotionally, which is an interesting situation. It really does sort of make another parallel there. Bobby and Lance are kind of sort of like a really interesting mirror of Kara and Ward. They were setting things up to make Bobby feel responsible for someone else's death, and it was seriously looking like it was going to be Lance. She was going to have to watch the guy who, let's face it, maybe she doesn't exactly love loving, but whom she still has serious feelings for, die. And she basically gets herself shot in the chest to prevent that from happening. Ward actually does kill the woman that he cares so much about, and yeah. And Brett Dalton gave this really interesting interview talking about all that, and it looks like pretty good odds that it's actually going to be Ward who's going to be the big bad of season 3. And he has some very interesting things to say about kind of where he thinks Ward's state of mind is right now. And when we see him with Ward kind of gathering what's little is left of Hydra around him, this is a guy who really just does not seem to care about anything. But he's definitely going to be out there looking to make S.H.I.E.L.D. pay for what happened, especially May. And speaking of May, I suppose this is as good a time as any to talk about her. Well, I definitely did like that scene where she manipulates things so that Ward kills Kara. It was smart and not more than a little vindictive. She's probably still smarting from having been played by Ward back in season 1. We also get to see her throw down with Skye, and it's a pretty even fight. I mean, Skye has come a long way, so obviously May is a very good teacher when it comes to fighting. And as good as Skye is, of course, it looks like May was going to win that one until Skye broke out the superpowers. Still, it is a real testament to May's skills that you have to break out superpowers if you want to take down Melinda May in a fight. And the episode even ends on an oddly positive note. It looked like she's walking off with what looked to me to be a pretty sexy bikini to go and spend some time hanging with her ex-husband. So, I'd be cool with that. I actually I think it would be really interesting if they were to bring him in as a supporting character next season. Simply because I assume that there are difficulties in bringing in Leonard Samson, who in my mind would be the perfect character from the comics to sort of handle that thing. But okay, under the circumstances, everything that's going on with S.H.I.E.L.D. and all these people with powers, having a psychologist around would actually be pretty beneficial, if you ask me. Let me see. Who else do we have to talk about? Oh yeah, there's this person called Skye who's kind of important to what's going on in this episode. And of course, this being the big culmination of everything that's going on with the humans, Skye is front and center. And I mean, so much stuff happens with her this episode. She has that interesting conversation with Raina where Raina even says, thorns protect the flower. And then you think about Raina and she's all covered in spines and spikes and stuff. And then it's ultimately her being willing to sacrifice herself to show just kind of what person Jiaying really is, that ultimately clues Skye into what's really going on. Raina protected Daisy. Thorn Girl protects Flower Girl. How ironic. Raina was the girl in the flower dress. Skye's name was Daisy. But yeah. And of course, we already mentioned that Skye had a really nice throwdown with May. But really, this episode was really just Skye trying to find that balance, trying to make peace, trying to find some way that these two groups that she cares about very much don't destroy each other. And at the end of the day, it really seemed to me like she chose S.H.I.E.L.D. But she did so in such a way that she also was able to protect the Inhumans. She had her own mother turn against her and even try and kill her. And yet her father, who was, the serious guy, the guy who turned himself into a monster, was ultimately the one that saved her, who saved the day, and killed her mom. And killed part of his own heart in the process. I mean, and I did definitely like that scene at the end where Cal says to her, like, look, I know I'm going away to be thrown in jail for the rest of my life. Will you at least come and visit me? And she says, yeah, and they even talk a little bit, and she kind of realizes, like, yeah, hey, I did inherit some things from my father. And I love that little joke she makes at the end. It's like, yeah, when I come and visit you, you're going to call it the best day ever. And Cal, in all seriousness, says, no, I've only ever had one of those. And then it says basically Sky's birthday, and points out that, like, yeah, the only really the best day of his life was still the day that she was born, despite everything that had happened. And yeah, points to Kyle MacLachlan, man. He really rocked it this season. Let's see what else is going on. We also get to see Coulson sort of acknowledge that, yeah, Sky is basically the closest thing he has to family. And then we even had that really sweet little scene at the end where Sky goes, sorry, bug, goes and visits her dad after he's been through the Tahiti process. He's like describes his veterinary clinic as a magical place, and she even uses her birth name of Daisy to identify him. Again, just a cute moment there. And of course, we also I think that kind of covers everything with Sky. So yeah, let's talk about Coulson. Again, Coulson's in a very similar situation. He's trying to do everything he can to salvage this situation. He doesn't want to go to war with humans. With the Inhumans. He doesn't want anybody getting hurt. He's really desperately trying to sort everything out. And amazingly enough, once again, Coulson pulls it off. He gets Cal to join sides with him. He helps. He saves Fitz and Mac from Gordon when he drops the crystal, and gets his friggin' hand chopped off in the process. And then it's heavily implied that he and Sky are going to work together to form the Secret Avengers, who in the comics, if I remember correctly, were actually formed by Nick Fury. And they're basically going to be sort of the super group of superpowered agents who work for S.H.I.E.L.D. And man, that's really damn cool. But yeah, nothing super huge beyond that to say about Coulson. Moving on to briefly talk about the bad guys. Well, I think I've said everything about Raina that needed to be said. I'm not the least bit surprised that they killed her off. I mean, the actress has been cast on that Preacher show as Tulip, so it makes sense that Raina had to go. Gordon, it's a little sad just how seriously, deeply Gordon drank Jiaying's Kool-Aid. He really did come across as being a fundamentally decent guy, but when push came to shove, he was willing to go out there and hurt people, people who really had honestly not done anything to him. He was willing to deceive people and cause all this harm, engineer this war, just to simply demonstrate just how powerful the Inhumans were to S.H.I.E.L.D. And he did show that he really did believe that Inhumans were better than ordinary humans. Again, Jiaying's influence, no doubt. Cal had that, like I said, that really interesting journey where he was basically just another one of Jiaying's puppets, a Trojan horse sent to, as he said, kill as many S.H.I.E.L.D. agents as possible. But, Coulson is able to reason with him and bring him down and ultimately get him to be on his side, and even ultimately to kill Jiaying. And it's Cal that clarifies, like, hey, that village full of people who disappeared in China, that was Jiaying sucking the life out of them in order to restore herself. He says that in the olden times, an elder would sacrifice themselves to kind of keep her and her long lifespan going, and every time that happened, she would beg them not to, and take their lives with tears in her eyes. And then after being basically dissected, vivisected by Whitehall, all that goodness seems to have just been stripped from her in so many ways. She didn't revere all life. She only revered the life of those who were like her, those who placed Inhumans above everyone else. And when her own daughter didn't go down that road, Jiaying was willing to kill her. And that's really the moment that crystallized things for Hal. It's like there really is no saving her. There is no back from this. Whoever the woman I loved is dead. Now I suppose it's a little odd that you could kill somebody who survived being vivisected by breaking their neck. You'd think they'd kind of be able to heal from that too. I don't know. I guess maybe they chucked Jiaying's body in the nearest incinerator or something. So there's that. And yeah, it's seems like more or less that at the end of the day, S.H.I.E.L.D. won. I mean, the Inhumans are leaderless and hiding on the run somewhere. S.H.I.E.L.D. knows where Afterlife is and has the bodies of several deceased Inhumans for them to examine. It's going to be a little bit harder now that Simmons got eaten by a big black rock, but oh well. And this all ends with the crystals sort of contaminating those fish oil pills. Honestly, I would say the bigger issue is those things are into the water, in the ocean. And if you paid attention in elementary school science class, you understand how this little thing called the water cycle works. Ocean water evaporates, the salt, kind of chemical stuff. But however, the water vapor goes into the air, it mixes with stuff in the atmosphere. Rain gets into the water table, and ultimately, eventually, into animals and plants and the water that people drink. So it ain't just those fish oil pills we got to worry about, folks. Although those are probably perhaps a little bit more concentrated. I mean, if you really stop and think about it, just drinking a glass of water might be enough to activate people's Inhuman powers. Now, presumably, anybody who's not an Inhuman who pops a fish oil pill is not going to turn into stone. I think people would figure that out pretty quickly. So, but basically, I think this is just a subtle way of saying, yes, people with powers are just going to be popping up from all over the place, and we don't need to explain exactly what happened to them. They're Inhumans who've had their powers activated. Although you have to wonder, if it's that easy to do that, why the hell didn't the Inhumans do this a long time ago? Well, actually, I guess that probably would have attracted a lot of attention, and doing that is really kind of the opposite of their thing. So with that said, guys, all in all, a pretty darn solid episode. Solid season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It kind of got off to a little bit of a slow start, but they did definitely get to where they needed to be. The show is much improved. So, with that said, I'm going to call it here. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. Until next time, take care and have a good one.